here's another room, just like the first one. Oh, and here's a sign. I've never seen one like this before. I have not seen this before.
As we have seen in the past many episodes of Evolutions of Forts, it is one in search of the best way of defending or protecting a city or strategic location from the advancements of weaponry your enemy may place upon it. The evolutions of weapons is mirrored in the increasing hardness, fortress walls, special cements, and reinforced bunkers, as history would see. Over centuries, however, forts or castles were constructed in a relatively confined area. A town within its walls, cannons on the walls firing in all directions in case of a siege, or coastal forts with its main armaments aimed seawards in order to cover an entrance to a port, for instance. And crossing into the 1800s, we see the small, confined, centralized forts begin, with all its main weapons and cupolas and steel domes mostly confined in one small superstructure. These forts, such as we saw in Denmark, Belgium, Holland, France, Germany, were initially built by stone, then cement. Later on, some degree reinforcement was seen before World War I. But these posed several tactical problems. The very centralization was one. It was a design feature to make it easy to centralize weapons, armaments in one place under one garrison. However, as we saw in Belgium, one heavy shell would and did penetrate the roof and ignited all the powder, and with one blast destroyed the entire fortress. With fewer guns in central places, if these were destroyed in such a way, or the observation posts surrounding it were compromised, the fort could relatively quickly be rendered out of action. And they were expensive to build as well. By the end of World War I, the era of such centralized forts had definitely passed. This led to a very different way of laying out defenses. Now, with the amazing Maginot Line forts and those of the East Wall and West Wall, these were constructed along a long border in order to delay the enemy from easily penetrating an entire country's border. So many smaller forts or fighting positions were constructed on a line, but most of the forts were located safely underground, with vertical accesses to small combat blocks protruding the landscape. Both the Germans and the French had realized that many smaller forts interconnected was a better way to go about defending territory. With defenses in depth, the huge Maginot Line forts were mainly underground, and they did perform their duty. They mainly made the Germans attack somewhere else, where, however, the mobility of the conventional army failed the French to stop the German advance. The huge centralized fort of Epinal was one of the clearest studies as to why one central fort was no longer viable. It was overcome in less than one night. All combat blocks were mobilized by German paratroopers in a textbook attack to breach the fortification. The world took heed of this, but still began to build huge static fortifications, guarding from the expected Allied invasion and defending waterways, just like centuries past. One can say the forts now took on a new shape, one of hybrid strings of individual firing positions, rung by local defenses, decentralized to a degree. The German World War II fortifications were placed at a distance from each other, with the crews and munitions separated from the guns themselves. So no one attack would make the entire complex inoperable. It was more complex than a fort itself. These were purposely constructed, purpose-built, designed from the ground up, reinforced with huge amounts of rebar, large cannons either encased or protected as of those of a ship. In fact, they were at times ships' cannons used. As we'll see in the coming episodes, the evolution during the Second World War made the weaponry towards the end of the war so large it would not even fit into the bunkers built just before the war's outbreak, such as the West Wall. Now the coast of France, Holland, Denmark, Norway was defended heavily by these new German bunker systems and fortifications, all placed in strategic places with emphasis of those likely avenues of approach of the enemy. And those important places have not changed over history. One of the more interesting forts here was built in 1547 in order to guard the harbor approaches. And yet after a long and interesting life, it ended up incorporated as part of the German Atlantic Wall defenses. And in 1944, it saw heavy fighting and battle all around it, 500 years after its initial construction. It all started with Mary of Hungary, the governor of the Habsburg Netherlands. She ordered the Fort Ramekens constructed in 1547. It is situated on the north bank of the western Scheldt estuary on the small island. Its purpose was to protect and control the waterways to Middelburg and Antwerp. The fortress, it was built over the former sea dikes and was given a diamond shape with a bastion facing the western Scheldt. It has thick walls in which cannons could be placed. A lot of natural stone had to be used because of the salty seawater. At the end of both walls were half bastions where cannons were positioned in the open. Later, during the Napoleonic period, these semi-bastions were vaulted over and given an earth cover. The walls on the land side are bricked. Here is also where the entrance is found. The gateway have a curved passageway to prevent enemy projectiles from penetrating far into the courtyard, something we see later on in Maginot forts as well. The courtyard was built up at the time. The fortress only had a moat on the land side, with the sea to its front. During the 80 Years' War, it was garrisoned by the Spanish until William of Orange seized it in 1574. During the First Napoleonic Wars, the British attempted to land in Belgium, the island, unsuccessfully, but still it prompted him to remove the buildings in the courtyard and build strong casemates and modernize its defenses. Having been returned to the Dutch, Fort Rammerkens was abolished as a fortress in 1869, and although it remained in use as a power magazine, it slowly fell into decay. It is the oldest sea fort in Europe. However, during the Second World War, due to its strategic important location, the fort became part of the Atlantic Wall, and it was occupied by German troops. They built several bunkers and other concrete defenses in and around the fort. The dike near the fort was bombed heavily by Allied forces in 1944 in order to flood the island of Belgium, as the British again undertook an invasion during Operation Infatuate, this time more successful but far more brutal. And as you make your way up the coast from Calais up through Holland, you come across a lot of interesting places and interesting positions. Some of them have recently begun to be discovered and excavated. We're going to have a look at these different open-air positions that we've seen elsewhere. And making our way over the island, over the estuary, we start coming across some of the smaller remnants of the positions the Germans built here and heavily fought for. But we're looking for a castle.
And it's interesting. Sometimes you find things on a map that says, here's a bunker. And you come here and all it is a little Tobruk here. With a very little intertwining little hallway. Tobruk is over there. And there's an observation post that would, put a gun to bear. Observation, possibly there was a road. And everything is very flat around here. Now, you're looking at German World War II construction. You're looking at red brick. And you're looking at bricks. You're not really looking at cast cement. You're looking at the interesting divisions between the layers. And this is pretty much all there is to it. You have a little Tobruk here. You have an entrance. And you have a little room where people can sit. And that's it. Now, what I like about this is the fact that it's here. Because it was covered up. And then someone decided to preserve it. Dig it up. Open it up, clean out all the dirt, and I think that's really nice, even though it is just a small little Tobruk position here near the Dutch coast. Of course, leads us to what else is on the Dutch coast.
I'm trekking up the Dutch coast here because, well, the Atlantic Wall extended all the way through Holland, and I'm not finding a whole lot of anything that resembles presence of the Germans, bunkers, forts, anything. But I'm finding a lot of old Dutch forts. The Dutch, of course, fought a number of wars with the British. And the Spaniards were here and others. So, well, it's an old cannon, which is actually in its current position, pointing back towards land. Oh well. 1808. That is a very large piece of material here. 1908. What was this? Well, had a good size to it. You would think this would be a fairly good place for the British or Americans to land. So I was wondering if there's no sign of anything German here. I would think it would be a good place for at least a lookout. And here are some of the classic walls you'll see of an old fortress from way back in the day. And on the outside is the harbor on the furthest embankment. It looks like the brickwork is later, and this looks like it had some evolutions to it of different brick, but it's interesting that looks like a slit for archers in the brickwork that actually looks the most recent. There's a very big arched gate here that I cannot read the date on. There's a little sign on the door, so let's see. And this is a type of brickwork I have not seen. It almost look like large stones with spacers. Wow. There's a cannon pointing at me. Very interesting. I gotta say something about this old cannon. It's hard to tell the age on it, because it really has a lot of corrosion and damage, but I'm guessing this was found in the water or spent some time submerged, as the corrosion is really dug into the metal. But here it is. And this fort does not look much older than what we see for the Maginot Line. That was built several hundred years after original construction. And I wonder how much kindly see what's in here. Wow. These old coastal forts, they're not very big. They're absolutely awesome. And this again had been bricked up, but it's arched, and always was. Although I would maybe the Germans plastered it. All the other hallways are not plastered. This would have been a place for, they could have set up for command or what have you. But for creature comforts, the Germans
could possibly have plastered this, since it doesn't look like it's original vintage to any of the periods. So this plaster could be very easily be new, but certainly this staircase that had a few things falling down of it is definitely new, definitely old. Oh, and here's another room, just like the first one. Oh, and here's a sign. Look at this up here in the roof. Here we have a very old light fixture. We have electricity running through here. So the Germans were definitely in here working on whatever they were working on. See here again, it's tied up, and the hooks. All these are World War II vintage. And I think those flak position is roughly above our heads. Yeah. Yeah, you can really see all the attachments, the typical attachments for a bunker in the roof in here. I knew they were here, I just didn't expect to find anything, I suppose. And here's some cement over this had drilled in recently. And here, more attachments, they're new. So the Germans used these two rooms, and then there's the one down here, sloping down under the other cannon position from what I can understand. Again, from what I understand, Napoleon I, he built this casemate in 1811, 1821. And here's the firing position covering the gate, the door, the entrance. And judging from the arches, again, they built something and then eventually it was covered up for some reason. All the different evolutions this fort has taken. And here's the other defensive port leading to the front. So on this wing beyond this wall, the Germans had a flak position up on the roof. It's very hard to tell if this was original. This predates World War II, certainly. I could have had a little hallway here that says to be bricked up. The bricks are a little different in the size of what's bricked in the gate here as opposed to the surrounding. But this whole surrounding I also think is a recent fix, 200-300 years, and then that. So it's really hard to tell without somebody who specifically has knowledge of all the different evolutions of this fort. But what a great little place. This, on the corner of the fort overlooking the harbor, was not built or restored by Napoleon. Not the first and not the third. We all know what this is, and we all know who built it. So the Germans did start occupying some of these old forts. And this was not just a Tobruk. That is
far more recent than the fort. But of course, no matter what century, you would place the forts based on the same strategic concerns. Unless there was a turret here. That could have been in place here. That would give you the reason why you would need to get into it. But there's no ammo storage or anything. Out here we're on the outer wing of the fort. And there's a little ammo storage on the side there. And there's a piece of cement sitting out there on the edge as well. And here, for the restoration or protection, they put in a little roof to protect what was. Well, there's a room in here that you could access, or I guess the roof in some way have caved in, or something has happened to it over time. A few battles have stood here, and a few different militaries have occupied this place. Now, once again, this was not here, left here by any of the Napoleons. So let's see, get some idea what this might have been. So, what are we looking at here? We're looking at the base for... I know there was anti-aircraft weaponry here. There's then also searchlights here. I just don't recognize this mount. However, Fortress Ramekens was used, as we clearly see, as part of the Atlantic Wall. There's a few flak cannons here, and the German soldiers that was here could use some of the tunnels and hallways for safety from air attack. Somebody's setting up for a birthday party, so you will have to forgive the tent. I get it though, a lot of different designs going on here, and a lot of damage that's been repaired, which is very interesting. This has seen a lot of interesting constructions and reconstructions over time, and repairs.
In 1809, the British landed here in order to open up another front in the war against France. They landed 39,000 people here, with 15,000 horses in July. But soon after, the soldiers began to get sick with fever, with symptoms of malaria, typhoid, typhus, and dysentery all combined, something that had also afflicted the French previously occupying the island. The fort was heavily bombarded, with the town on the 15th of August. However, by October, only 5,500 soldiers remained fit for duty. The remainder were now sick. Only 106 died in the actual fighting with a small French garrison, but over 4,000 died of the seas, and most of them remained sick long after the campaign. In December that year, the British abandoned the island. In 1944, due to the rapid advance of the Allied armies, early September, they had created themselves a logistical problem. The supply lines from Normandy to the front had become too long. So using the port of Antwerp would solve this problem. It had been liberated by the Allies on the 3rd and 4th September 1944. However, the banks of the estuary leading up to Antwerp were still in German hands. That allowed them to block shipping to Antwerp, especially from the island of Elsham, where the fort was located. This had become a bastion, full of long-range coastal guns and batteries that could completely control the sea approaches. This also, of course, made clearing the minefields around the estuary, sown by the Germans, impossible. Therefore, clearing the island had become a military necessity. The planning of clearing the island began on 19 September 1944, and the task was given to the 1st Canadian Army. Initially, infantry attacks were supposed to attack up through the islands of Zuid-Beveland and Sluisdam, which connected with Walcheren. The infantry attack up the estuary was initially planned to be supported by airborne landings on both sides. However, after Operation Market Garden had already exhausted all available airborne forces, this was ruled out. Now initially, the planning section had ruled out an amphibious operation. However, the General Simons put this back into play, as he recognized the drawbacks. However, he did prefer a strategic air offensive, in which the RAF were to completely bomb and flood all parts of the island below the high water level, and systematically attack day and night to destroy the defenses and wear down the garrison by attrition. However, thousands of Dutchmen also lived on this island. His idea was immediately met with opposition. The Canadian Combat Engineer Staff opinioned that bombing the dikes at Westkapelle on the western tip of the island would not suffice to flood the island. General Guy Simons, who was in charge, pressed home that he believed this would undermine the morale of the German 70th Infantry Division that manned the defenses on the island, as he hoped to submerge the German military installations on the island, and to make an integrated German defense impossible. The main objection against these considerations, apart the fact that they were not based on fact, was that inundation of the island would hamper the attackers even more than the defenders, as the inundation made tank warfare impossible. Despite these objections, the Allied commander, Eisenhower, gave consent. He also did not consult the Dutch government in exile, despite the fact that the Dutch Prime Minister, Peter Schoen-Gerbende, who had got wind of the planned inundation, demanded to see the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill about the matter. However, Churchill denied any knowledge of the plan. Bomber Command attacked the sea dikes near Westkapelle on 3rd October 1944, dropping 1,270 tons of bombs on the dikes and the village. This breached the dike and killed 152 civilians. The Royal Air Force had dropped leaflets the day before warning civilians to evacuate, but they had nowhere to go. Many people sheltered in a windmill that was also obliterated by a direct hit. As the Canadian engineers had predicted, this breach was not sufficient to flood the island. Therefore, on 7 October, 100 RAF bombers attacked the northern dike west of Vlissingen, where the fort was, and the dike near Redhem, at the east of the canal through Walcheren. This also did not contribute to flooding of the areas west of the natural obstacles, which meant that the flooding this area served no military purpose. On 11 October, more dikes were bombed north of the island, followed by more on 17 October. While the inundation were slowly but steadily taking effect, the RAF bombed the artillery positions. As these were built to withstand aerial bombardment, these generally remained without result. Thus, a few bunkers were taken out by chance hits. However, the bombing killed 40 more civilians in Bischekirche and 20 in Vlissingen. On November 1, 1944, the amphibious landings near the fort commenced. The initial landings were unopposed, but thereafter the German resistance grew, and the German artillery fire became very efficient. The landing force lost 172 killed and 200 wounded. The landings were supported by a large Allied flotilla consisting of 28 ships, including the battleship HMS Warspite and 2 monitors. However, German coastal batteries sank 9 gunships and damaged 10 others. The fire HMS Warspite laid down on the coastal batteries, however, was very efficient, but resulted in several 15-inch shells landing in the middle of the town of Domburg, killing 50 more civilians. The commandos cleared with some difficulty the dune area between Dornburg and Ostkapelle. On 3rd November, the final resistance was broken, and the Westkapelle landing force made contact with the force in Vlissingen. The third part of the plan of attack was a frontal attack on the German positions behind the Schloe Dam. The Canadian attack started during the night of 31 October, but it was soon blocked. It took 2 more nights before it was cleared. By November 2nd, the 5th Canadian Infantry Brigade managed to establish a bridgehead. The Canadians lost 34 killed, 105 wounded, several missing in action. The British lost 19 killed and 50 wounded. It was against fierce resistance they operated a bridgehead. The operation also was supported by artillery that accidentally fired upon a village of Aansmunden, an official Red Cross protected place under the Geneva Convention, killing 46 more civilians dead. To exploit the bridgehead, several brigades performed small amphibious operations, successfully circumventing the German blocking force at the end of the causeway. Before the end of the fighting, several German counterattacks were heavy and prolonged, including use of flamethrowers and counter-artillery. At one point, all the Calgary Highland officers in one company were wounded or killed. The fighting around the fort had ceased around 3rd October. And by the time the fighting ended on the island on November 8th, 41,000 Germans had surrendered, and thousands of Allied had been dead or wounded, including the hundreds of civilians killed. And those who survived were now faced with the rebuilding of the dikes and all their villages being flooded. But amazingly enough, our fortress had survived yet another war, another battle, and still stands here today. And you see the inscriptions of the German soldiers in the walls and the positions of the cannons on the roof and surrounding it still intact. Driving down, you come past several bunker positions, as this whole island is still full of World War II remnants.
Now this whole stone here most certainly looks like built World War II era. And it's very interesting because there could have been an antenna coming out here. Here in the last corner of the fort, it's interesting because here you have another slab that's put down, put a nice little land tabletop on it, but here you would have had a small 37, possibly a little captured weapon. Again, not an 88, but here the mounts are still in place on this, and it's interesting because when you go to the edges of it, you can still see what remains of the waterproofing, the tar that would also have been on top here. But here's another little flak position, probably with a radio behind it. So now you have two World War II German positions in this old fort. So I'm wrong. So over the entrance was an AA gun. Over here was something smaller mounted. And on the far end of the fort, up there by the two cannons, again was another position. Depending on the armament, not really the biggest threat. There could also have been weaponry placed in here in the courtyard, of course. So we got inside the fortress here, and you see the huge archway arches underneath, and Gefreiter Otto Weber, Weimar in August 1940. So definitely Otto was here. Thank you, Otto, for letting us know. But you see this was a huge castle. This was a real fortress from back in the day. And what is so interesting about this, you see the firing positions of these thick walls that saw battle in the 1500s, and here's another firing position. And some things have been done to this over the years. But you see there was an arch that was bricked into something smaller. And I can't help but to think or wonder how old this is, because parts of this was a defensive position spanning several hundred years. It was upgraded by Napoleon I, and it was used by the German army during World War II and bombed by the Allies. Although, quite frankly, when it comes to World War II, I'm not entirely sure that is a spectacular feat, since, well, the Allies pretty much bombed anything, even after they took it. The historian in me said bitterly. The soldier in me who likes to blow things up, not so much, but still. And they are setting up for a wedding in here, which is great acoustics, I will say, but we all know that I can't sing and should not, so I will not. See how thick the walls are. That is a firing position. It's really hard to see. This is really, really dirty. But there's maybe 5 meters of wall. That's how thick the wall was. These walls were very, very thick underneath the old bastions. We really wanted to find the hole in the wall where the Germans drilled down and put a radio or whatever it was they stuck through there. That really is something. I would get married here. That is a flashback to a different time, isn't it? This truly is. That was a different era. This is a gorgeous room. So, on the sides of the wall, here's another firing position. And if I'm not all mistaken, it's a firing position. And there's also a bathroom. And there is a bathroom. I love it. All the way up to the Maginot Line forts. There are firing positions and the bathrooms. Of course, it's been bricked up. I wonder if this is another one. Certainly you would have a defensive position in these small hallways in the walls of the fort. Red brick and something artful. This could have been a powder magazine. Oh, the acoustics in here is just awesome. Well, they should appreciate the fact that I play Dutch on TV. Okay. I got 4 words in Dutch, everything else is with accent. These must be the powder magazines. Pipe here. This looks World War II Germanish. I don't know, it looks like it could also be a water pipe, but I'm curious what that is. I'm dying. This place is awesome. Well, the floor is obviously not original. Let's see what light we got. There's so many walls and doors that was closed here. So what the hell's down here? And you have a little firing port. Which means this one would not have been here. Firing position on remote. Of course the plate is new, but this beautiful defensive position. So you have under the walls, this is inside the star, and you could have put a cannon position right here. And it probably was. So you can fight in all different directions from the star. That's exactly what there would have been here. You would have had cannons down here pointing in every direction. And that's why you'd have a ramp here so you can roll the cannons up and down. There'll be ramps, not stairs, but you have to pull the cannons around.
An old fort has seen all the different evolutions of warfare. Lots and lots of modernizations, changes for the change of weaponry, seen the different wars from big battles in the 15th century to World War II bombing by airplanes and German flak cannons on the roof. The evolution of war may take place, but the locations are usually the same. And whether you're looking for a location for your fort, for your defensive position in the 13th century, the 15th century, the 17th century, or the 20th century, you're looking for the same things. Defensible, elevated position if possible, defending the harbors. What do you need to defend? Where's the best place to defend it? Where can you be in a superior terrain location to that of your enemy? It's all the same then and now.
Locations. The Germans would not just build or use the forts they occupied in the countries they occupied. They would build a completely new series of fortresses and bunkers based on a completely different and new tactical situation. Which is very interesting because now they're facing outwards for a different type of defense, for a different era. Which meaning the old ways, the old forts would have to be modernized or would just not be good enough. Let's see what we find on the coast of Holland out here, except the pothole.
Here in these sand dunes, there are over 300 bunkers. Most of them had been covered up by sand over the years. Lost and forgotten for decades, they are now slowly being rediscovered and cleared to lay out exactly how this German fortification was set up. So for now, there's only some 280 more to dig out. I think you should visit and bring a shovel and see what you can find.
And it's not like you would not expect me to embark on something different. I found a map. And out here on the coast of Holland, there's something that said Geheim Kommandostelle. That will translate to secret commando location bunker. And I have no idea what I'm looking at. There was a Tobruk at the end of this walkway. And I have no map. It looks from above like a giant star fort location. But it is where I would expect the Germans to put up defensives, part of the Atlantic Wall, facing that way, where the Allies were, protecting the Reich that way. So now we're just going to figure out, what did they build here to do so? All right, there's only one thing to do. Find an elevated position, crawl up the sandbank, and figure out what the hell's going on here. So when I say I'm looking for an elevated position and I'm in Holland, well, this is as high up as I can get on the ground. And what really made this place special is that on this small tiny peninsula, or actually on this small island, 300 bunkers were built between 42 and 44. Some of the most modern positions the Germans had, some of the more modern techniques, even some experimental bunkers, special reinforcement was built here on this little island. So one could say that this was the location of the pinnacle of fortress construction come World War II. If only now we could find it. I'm on a small island in a flat terrain, and there's 300 bunkers, firing positions, even open sniper graves, and you'd think I could find one of them. Finally, here's something built during the Second World War that I recognized. There's something else, and there's something more. Okay, so they're hiding them all in one location. Well, ain't that just special? There's another one over there. Has a little Tobruk here. Let's start with him. What's he looking at? I can see why he would be up here. And then we have these two that I have never seen before on the Atlantic Wall, anywhere near Scandinavia. Now I'm curious. So what is this? Besides full of water, but that's not quite new, is it? This is ammunition storage. You would have ammunition in here. I'm just going to take it very slow down these steps. God damn it, they locked the door. But this is an ammunition storage coming from both sides. 2 doors, there's 2 rooms in here. I have lots of videos for you guys from Atlantic Wall up in Denmark of this type of storage. This is the entrance, looks up higher. It's taller than I've seen before. But that's what that is. So if you have ammunition storage, I'm imagining there'll be something heavier out here. That's very neat. So what's here? Here's the cannon position. With a great view of the world from here. It's just funny because these are so well hidden that the car is a couple hundred meters away. I spent hours walking around and I couldn't find these things. So they did a good job that it's still in place today. Shit's bunker. Boy, there's a lot of doors that are closed in these things. Does not make me happy. Brick staircase. Something could have burst in here. This is very open. I would imagine the only reason for this configuration and this large opening was to wheel the cannon out, and it'll be in here in shelter for air raids. And they put in all these doors because apparently Holland has a thing for protecting its bats, as opposed to showing its history. Now this, searchlight. Yeah, this would protect the searchlight. That would then wheel out on these up to an elevated position. Now this is neat. So here's the little firing position where they put the turret of, look like an old FT-17. Oh, yeah. All right. Ammunition storage, just like it would be in the tank turret. Little racks. There's no gun in here. And the cupola up there. Close defense. A lot of the French tanks were dismantled in this way to put on fixed positions near the beaches. Of course, the searchlight would be wheeled up from its garage all the way up here to the top of the bunker. And you do have a good view from here. But when you look at the roof for the searchlight, it really is not very thick. It is just built as an add-on garage to the reinforced bunker, where in case of bombardment you would actually be somewhat safe, somewhat sheltered. You see the sloping stairwell. That would thicken the roof by a good 3 meters, 3.5. Which is incidentally the same thickness of some of the old French forts built in the 13th century. 3.5 meters. So there's just a lot going on in this very small area. No wonder I couldn't find these things. They're hiding them all in the same place. Alright, that is the other entrance to the munition bunker. And this could possibly be similar. Looks like it is. Yeah, this is a munition bunker. ST-43. With the doors closed to protect the beds, I think. The room for ammunition. No frills, not much to see in there. It's interesting to see how all the stairs were made with red brick. The ammunition bunkers here. That would be the next cannon position. And you would have some naval guns to defend from an invasion. As well, of course, anti-aircraft cannons. These cannons must have lived in here. They must have. This is a cannon garage. And you can just, under the sand, see the red brick trail leading up to the position. It's just very large and very open. Just like the other one. Exactly what this is. Ammunition, and this will be the crew quarters, and then the cannon will live in here and be wheeled out when needed. So it couldn't have been the largest caliber. That would have been fixed in position. Of course, this is probably cheaper to have built these than a giant encasement for a cannon. But the cannon would come out and it would live here, which, if I read Dutch, that actually would state. This is a fixed position, but it is a wheel cannon. This was a Pak 38-97 with a modified undercarriage of the German 5cm 38 and a barrel from a French 7.5. Oh, bigger barrel. And we have all the ammunition storages here. They would wheel it in and then it must have been locked in place, because this was portable on wheels and sit itself on this mount. This I have never before seen. That's quite curious. All right. We're going back through the ammunition shelter. The reason why these bunkers are in such good shape is because quite soon after the war ended, they were literally engulfed and covered by sand. So they were protected. And the reason why we see them today is, of course, the army of volunteers that has dug them out, placed them, and even marked little signs on what was in them. And those guys, we owe a debt of gratitude. Sand is heavy, and they've done a good job. Now get to the bats and open them up, please. And here's another little Tobruk down there. Then the munition storage here. So this really was its own little fortress. And of course here you can see how much this was covered by sand. See the top layer? This thing was completely gone at that time. Then they dug it out and cleared up the sand from it. The ground would have been much lower than it is today, so you could actually see out over his parapet. But sand moves and it hides things. So thank God these guys dug it out. Good for them. See what's down here at 11. And look what they put on display. An old French 75. Well, at least some of it is. And here you can actually see, well, roughly how it would move in and out of place. That is very, very nice. And again, you can see how much this location would have been dug in and how it's been covered up. And then uncovered. That's nice to see. That's great. I'm glad that's here. And it even has a plate on it. That's a very nice piece. Very well restored, cleaned up from rust. Painted to protect it from rusting, as we are quite close to the ocean. It is a nice mock-up of the cannon. It shows where it would be, which explains probably why there is a munition storage down here. Of course, there's no way to wheel this in under shelter, I guess. So you'd have to carry the munition, leave the gun in place out in the open. Let's see what's up this way. There's something in there to my left. It is going down. I've never seen this before. I'm intrigued. Whoa, these stairs are not good anymore. They're really not. What is this then? Shelter? This is the water bunker. There would be a ground well here that would pump up water for the troops. And that's what you see the remains of the well and of the water tank. That is very neat. Unfortunately, the roof came down at some point. I have not seen any of these installations on the Atlantic Wall in Denmark or anywhere else before. Not like this, but this is nice. It's very, very nice to see. The stairs are very well worn. Makes me wonder if this was one of the more frequent visited places. I wonder why. I guess that'll bring water up a lot more than ammo. From the water bunker. I wonder if these pillars were actually here much lower. Well, the ground was much lower in most places here. It is a nice addition for the museum. wonder why they wouldn't have been here at the time. I don't see why they would. It's interesting. What is this besides full of water? If this is munition storage, I've never seen one like this before. Have you ever seen a World War II munition storage building built with bricked arches? I have never seen that before. Of course it is. It's not a munition storage. This is the toilet bunker. Hoo-yah hey. Of course. This is it. This is where the toilets would have been. I suppose that explains why it's made in brick, but with arches. That would probably have been a wooden roof. That is very, very nice. Very nice detail. There's a meter thick concrete roof on the toilet here. Well, 30 centimeters of concrete and a meter of dirt. But at least you had a protective toilet with arches. Yay. And another stairways down with an arched roof in red brick. I mean, I'm quite sure many of these were built by a local Dutch craftsman. But of course the designs would have to have been German plans, but arches are just, it's just arched roof and red brick. We're here white brick. This would just have been a little shelter, probably with a bunker oven and a door. This is really all there is to this room. Very nice arched roof. And the doorway is arched on the inside and on the outside. All built in brick. I don't see any cement reinforcing. It could also be a storage room. No cement reinforcement in that. So here we're looking at 12th, 13th century masonry in a World War II fortification. That does boggle the mind a little bit, doesn't it? And here we're back to the Tobruk. And ammunition storage. This is really what this show is all about. The evolution of modern warfare from the 12th century till the Atlantic Wall. And when you go through parts of the Atlantic Wall and you see bricks of masonry, throwback to 12th century masonry, red bricks, arches, you really get an understanding of how closely related all these fortifications are. And the interesting thing is, this started with the concept of fortresses. Fortresses, castles, city walls, protecting, keeping enemies out. This is a fortress. This is a relatively small position. 3 cannons, munition storage, water reservoir, bathrooms, food storage, crew quarters. Scattered out, not linked together by a wall, hidden behind a lot of barbed wire, machine guns, snipers' nests, protected in the entrances. Exactly like a fortress, like a castle. The concept of defense and warfare haven't changed, even though the methods, the building, and the weaponry have. You still start with the same motivation and with the same desire, and you're looking for the same tactical advantages when you place your fortress, your bunker position, or your castle. So weaponry and defense changes. And this is really where we can see the throwbacks from way back in the day, from the time of archery to the time of machine guns. Same firing ports, bigger cannons. On this unassuming little hill in here, they dug out and cleaned out some 20 bunkers. On this little island, there's 280 more under the sand. Good luck. Bring your shovel.
In 1942, with the prospect of a two-front war, Hitler ordered, by Directive Number 40, the construction of what essentially became the Atlantic Wall, stretching the entire coast of France up the way to the tip of Norway, 1,670 miles, that's 2,689 kilometers. Several million workers were drafted into the construction, as were a lot of local companies hired, all supervised by the Todt organization. There were over 600 approved standardized bunkers, Regelbau, and casemates, with over 200 standardized parts, all in order to facilitate a fast and efficient construction. The steel doors, air intakes, ventilations, insulation was all streamlined. However, a lot of different type of captured weaponry was incorporated simply out of need. The aim was to construct some 15,000 bunkers along the coast. However, given the pressed German war industry at the time and the needs, a lot less were actually built, and some hard choices had to be made. The most important, and possibly, was the landing places that had to be fortified for the heaviest and the fastest. Obviously, Calais, as the closest point to England, was heavily fortified. Holland certainly received its share of fortifications, but it was seen as less lightly placed for the Allies to land, as it essentially is one large water obstacle, and is not as near to the British ports as other landing opportunities. However, as we will see in the next episode, it was a place where British and American bombers would readily fly over on their bombing runs to Germany, so a lot of AA positions were placed here. These were smaller but more numerous, and of course with important ports here to defend as well. And as we saw in Denmark and Norway, huge cannon positions were placed in order to defend the straits between the two countries from the North Sea, and in order to keep the logistical route of Swedish iron ore clear through the Straits of Denmark. In Normandy and Calais, we see large bunkers, cannon positions such as the Battery Todt. Same design as we see in Norway with its 380mm gun pits, half encased by a large superstructure. This was also planned for Denmark, but it was never begun in time.
They were literally walking on the roof, just like we did in Norway, but the bunker had been sunk into the ground more than there. A little rear facing firing positions. I cannot believe that these were actually fired in anger. because when the Canadian troops took this, the Germans had just barely left or evacuated. They would not have fired anything that small at something this big. So I'm thinking maybe it was test shoots, test firing by the Allies after, because don't know whatever this anti-tank weapon, some direct fire weapon this was, obviously wouldn't do much to these walls. And you would think they knew that. Obviously the Germans expected the invasion to come here to Calais, since it is the closest point to England and it would be the shortest distance to sail. Of course they were wrong, but they placed cannons and huge batteries like the big 380s here, 4 of these right here around the Calais. These big cannons were going to be built in 40, fired its first shot in 1942 and didn't stop until a few hours before it was liberated by Canadian troops.
And what makes this interesting is this is a similar design to what we see in Denmark, or what we see in Norway. And I wanted to visit the Todt here, just to see how it was laid out different. Because it is the same armament, Canadian troops, as we would see there. So, we're circling the gun pit. They set up a nice little museum with a lot of arms. I like to see our weapons. Yes, this is special. Let's do it in my. That's a tank gun. We said 38. Yes. Yes, I always wanted to fire that. Looks a lot different when it's lit up like this, considering what we're used to. Oh, I'm not used to seeing a gun pit like this, really. I guess it's a horse-drawn anti-aircraft setup. That is very neat. I did not see that before. And those are fun to ride, I will say. But here you see in the walls a little Pak 36 with a mortar on it. You don't see a lot of those warheads. Wish they described what that was here so people would know, because that's a, shall we say, specialty item. But the Pak 36 did a much better job than it's been given credit for. Yes, Pak 40. Everybody should have one. Because you have a French 75mm that was repurposed and named Pak 40 98. But this was originally a French gun in use of World War II that was reused by the German army. Now, I don't remember seeing a basement in Norwegian or Danish, or did I? I might have done. Of course, everything's for displays, so we can't exactly see what there used to be here. Including some very shapely models. Working the radio. The barracks are very nicely set up here, with a lot of props and stuff. And of course, the most important little thing, they had a bunker oven. nice displays in here in the museum, which is very nice. Pretty sure there had to be. The rails so they would roll. Hand cranked air filtration. And the emergency hatch. So if under siege, they could dig themselves out. Here you can really see how long it is. Come down there and then you dig in and then you dig up. Mechanics and supplies. Somehow I'm sensing they might not have been in the same place. But it's a nice full museum with a lot of stuff here.
These were huge, decentralized fortresses, with ammunition, observation posts, crew bunkers, all separated, and the cannons themselves heavily protected and defended by heavy AA positions.
Well, as we all know, I don't really do museums, but I wanted to show you Battery Todt. The museum is really nice, has a nice selection, a lot of stuff. Despite the wind, it's not raining for a minute. Now there are 3 identical batteries, casemates sitting around here. Not restored, not turned into a museum. Let's go have a look at those. Don't even think about complaining about the wind in the microphone. There's no dead cat on this mic that will make any difference. We're just gonna go explore. Now there's some shrapnel, there's some damage to this up here. And of course it's been bricked in a bit. Now this is different from what I've seen in these type casemates before. So, well, there's a hole. Here we go. I need the mat to reach the gun bit. Easier. See? I told them it's completely futile to try to lock me out of these places. Here's the cannon pit. Seen those before. We've all seen them before without the graffiti, which I would prefer. Here are the ammunition rooms. The doors are missing. The lifts are missing, and the original German trench yard has been painted over. Oh, gee. And here as well. God damn it. Inside the encased dome here. Just like the other Lindemann bunkers, just like the other of the Todt complex. And here's a bricked up wall. Have we not talked about this? You know what? Well, it's post-war bricked up, but I don't know what was in there. Get another ammunition room, and we see these in better condition within Norway and Denmark and those forts. But these are still impressive to see. See, of course, in here to the swivel where the gun would be. That is now somewhat destroyed. I'll take a walk around the pit here. Here's something that came down. Could have been one of the hatches for the ammunition. Oh, it was. This is
by now very thin and very flimsy. The little green paint on there could have been one of the doors for the ammunition storages. This is in rubble, so there was some attempt at destroying part of this, from what I can tell. And of course, there's a lot of dirt that piled up in here. Dark hallway, yay. And it's gonna end, isn't it? Oh. Oh, rubble here. Where does that come from? Yes, it's gonna end here. I think on the Norwegian ones they ended here too. There's no reason to have a full 360 circle because the cannon was pointed in one direction and they built a casemate over it to protect it from bombardment and air attack. And this was never supposed to fire behind itself inland anyway. That's not what they were designed for. So you can really see it. Come up here and stand on standing up here on the swivel. But there's some destruction to it. And I like the Norwegian bunker, where in that direction there was a little offshoot, a little blockhouse sitting on top of its back. And here it's just encased. I wonder if this suffered direct fire. I'm gonna have to go out and around it because there's no way up from here. See the heavy steel construction and the rivets. Down here in the well. Sense that something's been bricked up or missing somehow. Don't know why I get that sense. Remnants of where the ammunition would have come in to the ammunition storerooms in here. I see there's still a little bit of the rail left. Yeah. Here's the first of the ammunition rooms. Wie sie Winston Churchill wie lange noch? General Nebel, die Zukunft sieht plötzlich so grau aus und verschiebend. It is just, I don't care what side of war graffiti is on. This was still a look into the mindset of the people who fought here and what they thought and believed in. And don't ask me why, but I do know a few things about graffiti, at least how it used to be. And you really didn't want to tag somebody else's graffiti, because that was just a big no-no and bad things would happen to you. So why do you think it's okay to tag World War II historical graffiti? Don't ask why I know something about graffiti. I was younger, okay? Oh yeah, this is the second medicine room. And see what's left of the rail that looks like it's kind of falling down. Might get rid of that. Could be the first time. Alright, let's go outside, see what we can find. Now, it's gonna go with emergency exit, but oh, look at this! If that would defeat the paint of the flag and medals. here, another opening. Oh wow, just a little shelter built to it. Corrugated metal. I have not seen this before. Lego tile floor and an escape hatch. So there's an emergency exit on this corrugated metal, circle little. Wow, this can't be that deep underground. I don't see this being covered up. That's interesting. It's looking at a meter or two right next to the battery where bombers would aim, and the men could hide in there. That's still, so we get on the roof of that little shelter. That's something I haven't seen, but a lot of these had individual touches depending on the terrain and the location, which made sense. That's different. I haven't seen that on any of the others. There's coming down there, and underneath is the shelter. Need to go compare this to some of the photos, see what exactly this was. Maybe a flak position or something. And the Todt is to the right of us. Red brick up there. There's actually a red brick in this construction.
These larger positions were interspersed by smaller 10-15 centimeter guns that you see in many places that started as a gun on a platform simply sitting in the open. So as soon as materials would then become available, this would be upgraded and to be encased in a bunker would be developed, such as these Point the Hawk, which was under active construction or reconstruction at the time of D-Day. This is why there were no cannons in this actual position. And the landings literally caught the constructions in the middle of the rebuilding phase, as you can see if you visited there today. As you see, the beginning of the huge casemates built right next to where the cannons had been sitting in the open.
An ungodly amount of ordnance had been dropped on this tiny space. On D-Day alone, over 700 tons of bombs have been dropped on the casemates. However, the casemates were still being constructed, and the guns were not there, as the Rangers landing here was soon to find out. There's a whole different story being rewritten of the events of that day and the subsequent 3, but that's for a different day. And just because the Rangers didn't find the German positions they had expected did not mean they did not find resistance. And everywhere here bears clear signs of that, including the forward observation bunker here that was clearly taken by a fight.
Still, there are many hundreds of bunkers and forts unaccounted for. Many were simply covered up after the battle and abandoned only to be found, or as some recently be discovered, such as the Battery Macy. But a lot more on that story to come. And next week, I took a lesson from one of you guys, and I went to visit one of the most interesting underground positions I've ever seen near the coast. Taking a hint, I teamed up with a couple of teenagers who obviously had found their way in to party. Always trust the locals. See you next week.
Behind me is Vanna von Braun's first test stand. Down the road is Dietmar's nuclear reactor. Over there is the Maginot Line and all its amazing forts. I'm visiting them all and I'm bringing them to you. So I really appreciate you like, follow, and share what I'm doing, trying to document all these important historical locations. And if you feel like you want to watch more pictures or documents that I use for these, go to lostbattlefields.com. And if you feel like helping me out with my travels, because gasoline and travel and airfare is expensive, my PayPal is there, protectionserviceinc.com. You are more than welcome, but you don't have to. I appreciate all your support and all your help, and I love seeing these locations, and I love bringing them to you.